Good evening, welcome to Crushed Custard, latest episode. I want a slight break from the album generator game just while we're getting the next one set up, and we're going to today do a bit of a look back at one of the albums that I reviewed a few years ago on the old written blog. Now this album today is by a chap that a lot of you will know that I have got a great deal of respect for, a fine musician, fine songwriter, one of the greatest in fact, from Canada, Mr. Burton Cummings, and we're going to be taking a look at his most recent solo album, which came out in 2008, called Above the Ground. Now, as I said in my initial review of it, I'm thinking of putting myself forward as a non-Canadian ambassador to Canadian music, because I seem to be forever extolling the virtues of maple leaf musos and a lot of Canadian musicians in my collection, and in my eyes at least, Burton Cummings is the musical king of Canada, despite all the other undoubted talent that's come from there. Now, for the uninitiated, he was the main protagonist behind the band The Guess Who, a band who in their own way were as influential to the success of rock music in Canada as the Beatles were in England. Cummings is still thought of as a musical god and songwriting genius in his homeland, but unfortunately the rest of the world seems to have difficulty seeing past his Guess Who hit American Woman. Now, Cummings delivered numerous solo hit albums and singles in the back end of the 70s, but like most of his kind has been a bit sporadic in the recording department over the last 2 decades or so. So this 2008 offering of 19 completely new tracks was much anticipated by his hardcore followers. Now, being over here in England, it was even harder to get hold of, so when I finally managed to get my hands on a copy, it was with some trepidation, but with a great deal of faith that I put the cans on and settled down into the chair to give it a listen. Now, I needn't have bothered with the trepidation bit though, because from the very first note of the opening track, Crazy If You Mess With The Gods, it's clear that Cummings has lost none of his talent whatsoever. The clever lyrics, the catchy riffs, and the instant stickability of his hooks shine like a beacon above the offerings of some of his so-called musical betters. Seriously, this album has got a little bit of everything in it, and with its length, it could easily pass as a best-of for people who are unaware of the artist. The aforementioned opener is a great foot-tapping up-tempo track, which would not have been out of place on either his earlier solo albums or even the Guess Who albums. Things don't let up either with the second track, Junior Won't Behave, which is a great heavy riff, but a lyric which only Cummings could really get away with, being about the restrictions of parenthood. Not exactly the most obvious rock and roll lyric to put over such a heavy riff, but it works. TPOS then follows, which has some really good rock and roll piano. Cummings then moves the bar up a notch again with Any Minor Miracle, which is one of those songs that just gets to you straight away. It's got one of those lyrics and melodies that just hits you right from the very first time you hear it. It brings a lump to your throat and a smile to your heart at the same time. The quality never really drops on the album, and even the more ordinary songs are an enjoyable way to spend 3 or 4 minutes. Ponderlust has a similar type of feel as the opening track, and even the album's possible low like Roll Away, which is a throwaway campfire type almost comedy song. It doesn't fail to leave a smile though in its wake. We Just Came From the USA as another classic, almost tongue-in-cheek Cummings lyric and the stomping rhythm before we get surprised again by the almost reggae calypso of Pretty Pictures, which again, like the earlier Any Minor Miracle, just hits the spot and becomes an instant favourite. And the next surprise isn't too far away either, as Look Out Charlie follows, which is just full of swing-like melody, and another great lyric which you find yourself singing along to within a couple of listens. Kurt's song and Richard with its in places menacing vocal don't let the quality drop either before we launch into one of Cummings' almost chocolate box love songs, Dream, which, again, like Pretty Pictures, has a nice calypso undertone. Up in the Canyon, conversely, has a really jerky, almost staccato-like keyboard sound to it, with Cummings delivering a jazzy vocal, which couldn't be as far removed from the previous track if it tried. The jazz theme continues with A Touch in the Morning, even if it's in a bit of a more swing cabaret shuffle style. Revelation is up next, and it's a perfect example of Cummings' genius as a lyricist. His storytelling within a lyric is streets ahead of any of his contemporaries, and yet he always manages to keep the melody and the rhythm intact and never loses sight of the fact that the songwriter's job is to entertain and not to preach. something which is also evident in Invisible, another song which just grabs your heart and wrenches it down to your stomach. Its ability to mix feel-good, heart-wrenching, thought-provoking and identifiable feelings and emotions over a great melody which even the most stone-hearted listener couldn't fail to be moved by. Retribution sees the tempo move up again, and this once again veers more into Guess Who territory, and is to all intents and purposes a straight-up rock song. The album ends with the title track, another classic Cummings composition over a great stomping jazzy rock piano rhythm. So to conclude then, this is an absolute must for anyone who has any appreciation of Burton Cummings for one, but also anyone who just has an appreciation of good songs which are well played and well sung. Likes good melodies, clever catchy lyrics and plenty of variety in their albums. In the space of this album you can imagine you're in a sweaty rock club, on a beach in the West Indies, on a cruise ship or in a jazz cafe somewhere in Canada. Even the album's length, which comes in at over 75 minutes, doesn't let it down, as at no point do you find your mind wandering due to the continual changes in style and the continually clever and thought-provoking lyrics. In fact, I only have one complaint about this album. Why did we have to wait so long for it? So those were my thoughts then on the most recent Burton Cummings, still sadly the most recent Burton Cummings solo album, way back in January of 2010 when that review was officially published, and to be honest I haven't changed my mind about a word of it since, and it's still a regular spinner here. I wish somebody would press it on vinyl. Okay, I hope you enjoyed today's episode of Custard, a quick deep dive if you can have such a thing. We'll be doing more of these in the future, and I look forward to seeing you all on the next episode.